It is 5:30. We want to welcome you to our called meeting for July 15th, 2025. And with that, we will call this meeting to order, and I'll turn it over to you, Madam Superintendent.
Thank you, and welcome everyone online and here with us tonight. Thank you. And Mr. Chair, the first time on the agenda is to approve the agenda. So with that, I would make a recommendation to approve the agenda.
Thank you, ma'am. Board, we have a recommendation to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor by raised hand. It is unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next item on the agenda is a few items under Superintendent's report, and I wanted to share the updated last month's SPLOST collection with you all, and it was $854,197.99, and it was just a small amount, just 0.1% over the collection to date of last year. So even though it's up, you like for it to be statistically a little higher, but we are still blessed for that collection. School governance team report. There's only one school that had a meeting last month. Our charter only requires 6 meetings, but they recommend 8, and Blue Ridge Elementary was the only one that had a meeting, and they introduced new members and set meeting dates for the year, and they didn't have any action items. And Ms. Collis, if you'll just scroll through the rest of that just to show that there was no other business at the school level. Thank you, ma'am. And board, the next item on the agenda is just a calendar, just highlighting the upcoming events on the next couple of weeks to get school started back. This is always a very exciting time, and I just wanted to officially and publicly invite and announce everyone back to the Fannin County School System Back to School Bash, which is scheduled for July the 26th. From 9 until 3, it will be at the high school gym, and so I look forward to seeing you all there. Also, the beginning of the year kickoff program, where we get to welcome all of our faculty and staff back, is July the 31st. It'll be at 2:00 p.m. at the Performing Arts Center at the high school. And then, of course, in August, we have the August board meeting on the 14th, but before that, we have open house on August the 4th from 1 to 5, and that's grades 1st through 5th at all elementary schools, 6th and 8th, and then 10th and 12th. And if you'll notice, kindergarten and pre-K was not on there because we want to do something special this year for our new parents coming in and our new kids coming in. So pre-K and kindergarten and any student that's new to that elementary school will have a special open house for them on August the 4th from 5:30 to 6:30. And then, of course, 9th grade is such a big transitional year. Their special open house will be August the 4th from 5 until 7, and I look forward to seeing everyone there as time permits. So. Okay, next item on the agenda, and I've got a little bit of an allergy, so if I start coughing, I apologize. But that is to approve the table for public review policy sections I through M. And this is a huge section, so if you all will just bear with me as we get started. And Ms. Collis, what I'm going to ask you to do is I'm going to ask you to follow me with the policy and then have the chart there available. The first policy is IBB for charter schools. It is recommended that we retain this policy as revised, and the revision brings modern language from 2020, and we can do away with the chart, the timeline at the bottom. And this charter school isn't for the charter that we are. This is for if someone wanted to come in and do a specialized charter, and legally we have to have a policy about that process. Next policy, IDBA, sex education, retain without revisions. The next policy, policy IDDD, gifted student programs, retain as revised. And the only revision on that is to state the state board rule that requires this policy, and that just helps for, to solidify the policy for Fannin County. So my recommendation will be to retain as revised. The next policy, IDDF, Special Education Programs. It's discretionary. We don't have to have this as policy. Federal law says that we only have to have the age out requirement written down somewhere in our procedures. However, I think it's important, and I know how the board's heart is for specialized instruction. I think to make this a forefront of retaining this as a policy, because we provide services related to federal law to the 22nd birthday. And then the school system has a choice to do the 22nd birthday, the end of the semester of the 22nd birthday, or the end of the year. Fannin has historically done the end of the semester of the 22nd birthday, and that's a balance to help families. So again, even though this is a discretionary policy, I would recommend to retain this. It is also stated in another one of our policies, the age out requirement is in policy JBC. But again, I would retain without revisions. Ms. Collis, the next policy is IDE 3, and this is competitive interscholastic activities, grades 6 through 12. I would recommend to retain as revised. And it seems, when you read it, it seems like there's not much changed, but the word requirements set forth in the Constitution and bylaws of the Georgia High School Association makes this policy stronger to let us know that we're going through the expectations of what our state and what the Georgia High School Association requires as far as competing in interscholastic sports, and as far as gender and all the other requirements, drug use, etc., of our students. So that goes a long way, that one word. And then at the bottom, there was a clerical mistake, and that information was repeated. That will actually be included in the footnotes and shouldn't be on the actual policy. The next policy, IDFA, equity in sports, and this is really getting into where you're talking about your Title IX stuff, and it's stating that you, that regardless of gender, you have equal opportunity to participate in interscholastic sports, and then if not, it tells you that you can appeal. So my recommendation on that one would be to retain as revised. The next one is IDFC, community coaches. This policy is not recommended by GSBA, which is Georgia School Boards Association, because community coaches is handled administratively, and we actually handle administratively here at the school level, and we follow the GHSA Constitution and guidelines and support of our athletic handbook when it comes to community coaches. So my recommendation would be to rescind or do away with that policy. Next policy is IEDA, unstructured break time, and my recommendation is to retain without revisions. This is a newer policy in 2024, and it was actually adopted based on legislation that was adopted at that time that makes it a requirement for elementary students to have unstructured, AKA what we call recess, during school. The next policy is IFBC, media programs. My recommendation would be to retain as revised, and the only thing that was added was that we would follow things in accordance to the State Board of Education rules and regulations as well for our media programs. The IFBG, internet acceptable use, will be to retain as revised. It was originally written or adopted in 2007, then reviewed in 2020. Well, a lot of things have happened just in the last 5 years. The spirit of this is the same. It's basically, there's going to be 2 internet policies to keep people safe. This one basically has the spirit of what the user is responsible for and what will happen. And this policy may actually have revisions due to legislation or state board rule between today and Thursday. If that don't happen by then, if it should change after that, then we will pull this one back out in isolation to make sure that we're compliant with that spirit. So there's on how we use it, so I would recommend to retain as revised. The next one is actually a new policy that I would recommend, IFBGE, and the other one was how people have to be responsible to use it. This states our responsibility in protecting those people on our end to use it. And so that falls a lot on Mr. Scotty's shoulders and all the things that we guarantee to put in place to keep our kids and people safe. IFBC, field trips and excursion, I would retain without revisions. That's just saying that the board will support those activities that support instruction. IFCD, school volunteers, I would recommend to remove that policy or demolish it, because our volunteer and mentor program, which we now have an official mentor program, and those are both handled administratively at the school level and then with district support. So we manage to make sure that fingerprinting and all those things are done. So we regulate that at that level. Policy IHE, promotion and retention. I would actually recommend to retain as revised. And if you'll scroll down, Ms. Collis, those little bitty red lines used to be just cut or dry how kids could be retained or prevented from going to the next grade level, and it didn't afford the kids a lot of protections. So the recommendation for the revisions of this policy actually puts the responsibility on the principal and a team, so more than one person. It can't just be for one data point. And it also states that we as a school system have a responsibility to have provided interventions and supports for that student before we can just retain them from going to the next grade level. So that makes that process a little stronger and a little bit more protection for the student. The IHF, graduation requirements, recommend to retain without revisions, and it we will actually follow the State Board of Education rules as far as graduation credits go on that one, and then the board can be in agreement if we require more. Policy IKBB is concepts complaint resolution, and this is actually a policy of how people can file a complaint if they feel like they, or stating that we will not, that a teacher will not teach slanted issues, like slanted toward their personal political preferences or race discrimination or those kind of things, that you keep the instruction just at the standards and keep it neutral. And it's also a way how to, if somebody thinks that happened, for the official process to file the complaint. So my recommendation would be to retain without revisions. IKBC, material harm to minors complaint resolution process. It's basically saying that we're not going to let anything around hazardous materials around kids, and if somebody thinks that we are, it's the process of how to come let us know about it and file the complaint. And then IKD, it says school ceremonies and observances, and that is basically stating that the school board supports and requires that we provide a time to say the Pledge of Allegiance on a daily basis. So that's the end of the I policies, and if you all will give me a moment to have a sip of water, I'd appreciate it. Next section. This is all about students. This is the big one. So this is, so JAA is equal equal educational opportunities, retain without revision. It's stating that we will, that everybody is afforded an equal opportunity to the same education without discrimination. JB is a student attendance to retain without revisions, and that outlines our expectations that students comes to school, and if not, what will happen on our side and how we will support that process. JBC is school admissions, and school admissions I would retain without revisions, and this is just admissions, it's not residency, and admissions is just it outlines the same requirements that the state does as far as to be able to come to public school and grades and those kind of things, grade levels, sorry. Policy JBC 1, I would recommend to retain as revised. It is the same spirit, but the language has been updated to include new language that we have discovered since 2007, so that was pretty outdated. And of course, our homeless liaison is Tara, and we follow all the federal guidelines as well to support those students. JBC 4 is normally next, and it's awarding units and transferring credits. You all actually approved tabling that policy last month so that you all can look at any potential revisions or anything and vote on it this Thursday so that we can have awarding units and transferring credits in place prior to the first day of school starting. So I'm pulling that one out conceptually, and so when I make the recommendation at the end, that one will not be included. JBCA is resident students, and it's stating that resident students can that live in Fannin County can go to our schools, and that if they want to transfer within schools, that we have a process in place for them to pursue. The next policy is JBCB, non-resident. Oh, and I need to say that JBCA, resident students, that is not a required policy, it's a discretionary policy. However, I do recommend that we retain this policy because we do have the process of when people request to go between elementary schools, and so we have a process that supports that policy. JBCB is non-resident students. My recommendation will be to retain as revised, and again, this is a policy that is not required. It can be handled administratively. Again, I recommend that it be in policy, and the recommendations, of course, would change a lot, and one of the things would be that the enrollment of out-of-state students not be permitted, and that other students who live inside the state but don't pay taxes in Fannin County, there would be a process for a tuition paying opportunity to come here if they met the criteria of grades and attendance and behavior. So if this policy is passed eventually, then what we would do would have an administrative regulation that would help support this policy and this process. And then my perception would be that the people that are already here that don't meet this criteria would be in that admin reg, they would absolutely be grandfathered in some way. But it would be, that would take some time to work that up and write that. The next one is unsafe school choice option, and I would retain without revisions, and that goes along with State Board Rule 160-4-Ag.16. JBCD is transfers and withdrawals. This is a new policy. It's new to the district. It's intensive. This helps us be compliant with that safety legislation that just passed, where and part of that legislation is the requirements of the records that we have to immediately send or receive prior to kids getting to come to school based on, Lord help us, what happened last fall. So this policy would help us be in compliance with that legislation. And of course, it is new to the district, and my recommendation would be to adopt it and retain without revisions. JCABB is student drug testing, and my recommendation is to do away with this policy because the drug testing and those kind of things is covered in student code of conduct and under GHSA for sports and those kind of things. However, we did not have, and I'll get to it in a minute, a code that covered, this was drug testing. We didn't have one that technically covered just our expectation for student drug use. And that's going to be a couple of policies down. So what I would do is I would recommend for the drug testing to go away. Sometimes it's not been easy to be 100% compliant with this due to actually getting the materials that's required. And I don't know if Officer Couch could speak to that or not. I think that, you know, I've talked to Dr. Ramsey and stuff, and I know that sometimes it's been hard to do those things. So to not be in violation of that policy to do that one. But when we get to JCDAC, that will be new to the district, and it's about drug use by students. So JCAC, excuse me, JCAC is, I would retain as revised. It's sexual harassment of students, and it follows the letter of the law of what we legally have to do if, Lord forbid, that was to happen. The only revision is on the last page, and due to the nature of the federal government stance right now in the U.S. Department of Education and not knowing what that's going to change into, the language was changed or the equivalent position with the succeeding organization, so that because the law has not changed this last session, and that would keep us from having to revise the policy if the name was to change just out of the blue for the U.S. Department of Education. So not the spirit, just that clarification. Then JCDA is about our student code of conduct, and of course our student code of conduct is reviewed annually, and the expectation is that there will be input from parents and from different teams. Mr. Drury goes over all that with us. This is another one that the spirit of the code of conduct stayed. The language has changed. And of course, it does say that the board will approve the different schools' code of conduct. The schools collectively follow the districts, and even though it doesn't say annually, that is our practice, is to have you all to approve and review the code of conduct annually. Okay, this is the next one is JCDAC, and this is the new policy that I was talking about as far as student drug use. And this is stating that not only if kids get caught with drugs, we have a responsibility to help identify or provide rehabilitative programs with them. But another thing that it states is that any violation of this has to be reported to the superintendent, to our SRO or the police, and then the district attorney. And that's actually part of the law, and that would help us to be compliant on that. So this policy with GHSA and the Student Code of Conduct following the process of drug use, this policy helps us to be responsible to the students, to provide them help to help overcome something, but it also makes it more solid that we have an accountability to let somebody bigger than the school system to know that someone's in this situation. JCDAE, weapons, I would recommend to retain without revisions. JCDAF, this policy is new to the district, and this is based on the legislation that was passed this last session. And it's for the cell phone use for kindergarten through 8th grade students, and not being permitted to access their personal electronic devices while on school. And the middle school actually worked with this last year from an administrative that was there. They wanted to see if it had a positive impact on instruction, and so once legislation passed, we're in a good spot to be compliant with this. We don't have to start until later in the year, but it's my expectation that if this passes, that we begin this practice right away. And again, that's to help us to be compliant with that latest legislation. JCDAG is our bullying process and policy, retain without revisions. JCEB is student hearing procedure, and of course we know that better as tribunals, and I would retain without revision. And that previous policy and this one just follows but follows the letter of the law. JDA is corporal punishment. I would recommend to retain without revision. JDF, teacher authority to remove students from the classroom. This is a new policy to the district. It has been practiced. It is published on our website, and it is law. However, my recommendation is actually to move that expectation into board policy as y'all's expectation as well. And JGC, student health services, I would retain without revision. That stating that we will have a health program, and we will have school nurses, and Miss Martha knows all about how to keep us straight on that. And JGCC is infectious diseases. It's saying that we will follow the law if we're exposed to any kind of infectious diseases or know about them on our campuses. JGCD, medication, retain as revised, and it's another one that was originally adopted in 2007. And the spirit is the same, but there's been updated legislation and actually identified medications that had to be named in the policy. So my recommendation is to retain as revised. JGF is student safety, and it's basically stating that we have a responsibility for keeping students and visitors safe when they go into classrooms such as welding or chemistry or any thing where they could come in contact with bodily harm. And JGF 2 is seclusion or restraint of students. I would retain without revision. JGFGB is concussion management. I would retain without revision. JGI is child abuse or neglect and reporting responsibilities, so I would retain without revisions. JGJA, suicide prevention, I would retain as revised, and it puts a reference to the Georgia Code because latest legislation has made it a requirement for us to beef up part of the education part of postvention and prevention. Well, postvention is afterwards, but prevention of suicide awareness and prevention. JKA, solicitations of students, and I would retain without revisions, and that's basically part of, it gives you student protections where parents can have the right to inspect any curriculum or withhold their student from participating in surveys that have certain questions that pertain to the information that is in those numbered items there. The next one, JKB, this policy is not needed. It's solicitation by students, and that's like students participating in fundraisers. That is actually handled administratively and governing at the school governance team level. Excuse me. Policy JR, student records, I would retain as revised. This wasn't quite, and it's amazing that about 4 words can make something a lot stronger, but I recommend removing generally, because it's not generally, it's all the time. And they're not just, parents aren't just allowed to obtain records, but they can expect, review, or do whatever they need to their students' educational record. The next one is JRA, student data privacy complaints, and that's all about FERPA. And if someone thinks that their privacy rights have been violated, that is the step process of how to go about the complaint and for the investigation. JRB is new to the district, and it is all about parents' Bill of Rights. And it just reiterates some of the things that we've been saying in the other ones, like the surveys and things, that parents do have rights to and look at instructional materials. They have the right to, basically, they have the right to, if it has to deal with their kid, it's their business. So, and even though we don't have that policy, it would be my recommendation as a collective voice of the board to y'all to know that how you support parents and their rights. Because ultimately, it's their kids. Okay. Now, K's. K is a use of school facilities. I would recommend to retain with revisions. And it was outdated. We had, like, the PAC coordinator would do that. We don't even have a PAC coordinator anymore. So I don't want to be out of compliance of policy. So I've got to have one for them to do it. So the high school principal or designee, and then the ag barn was designee. And then at the very bottom, these 5 bullets, 3 of them are legal requirements, but all 5 is what we require, and it's on our facilities use form. So it just makes it stronger for the policy to match our practice. So I would recommend to retain as revised. Now the L's. LDAJA, this policy is not required and is handled administratively, and it's basically interrogations and investigations of students, and it deals a lot with when a like DFACS or an officer or somebody can talk with students. And so my recommendation is to not have that policy. And then LEBA, parental involvement in education. And again, that's just providing parents the opportunity to be involved again with their kids, which is the way it should be. And my recommendation is to retain without revisions. So, with that said, my recommendation is to table until the regularly scheduled meeting in August policies with recommended changes, new, or to go away in sections I through M of the Fannin County Board Manual be tabled for public comment, like I said, until the August meeting. So, Mr. Chair, with that, I make that recommendation.
Yes, ma'am, that's a lot to say right there.
Yes, sir.
Not sure I can remember all that. But what she said. So, board, we have a recommendation to approve to table for public review policy sections I through M with any changes or any new ones that are added. So with that, do I have a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, sir. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? All in favor by raised hand? It is unanimous.
Thank you, and thank you, board. Thank you all for being willing. Y'all have just, once these are not tabled anymore, you all have officially, in 7 months, reviewed, revised, removed, added to your whole board policy. So, not that we won't have to visit them from time to time again. And like I said, that one may have to come back we can't, you gotta keep up with the legislators sometimes, and sometimes it's a slow pace, sometimes it's a fast one, but, all right. Mr. Chair, next item on the agenda is I'd like to request executive session for personnel and safety, please, sir. And if you don't mind, I would like to invite Mr. Darvin back with us, please, sir.
Yes, ma'am. So board, we have a recommendation for executive session. Do I have a motion?
So move.
Have a second.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor by raised hand? We are in executive session. Need a motion to return from executive session.
So move.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, sir. All in favor by raised hand? It is unanimous. No action was taken while in executive session. Madam Superintendent?
Thank you, sir. If everyone would turn to their personnel sheet, please. First item on the personnel sheet is the recension. You all approved to offer a job to William Stone, and he ended up not being able to make a commitment to move to Blue Ridge. So with that said, Mr. Chair, I make a recommendation to rescind the approval of William Stone for school year 2025-2026.
I'll make that recommendation. Do I have a second?
Second.
So I have a motion and a second. All in favor by raised hand? It is unanimous.
And Mr. Chair, if I don't have an objection, I'd like to take the next two resignations collectively.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, that would be April Jones, effective 6/30/2025, and Enoch Martin, effective 7/7/2025. Mr. Chair, I make that recommendation.
Thank you, ma'am. We have a recommendation board. Do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Second. All in favor by raised hand? It is unanimous.
Thank you. Mr. Chair, if there's no objections, I'm going to take groups of these collectively.
Yes, ma'am.
And these are all pending completion of paperwork, background check, and training requirements. The first one will not be collective, it'll be standalone, and that is a recommendation for Allison Spees as an administrator for school year 2025-2026. Mr. Chair, I make that recommendation.
Board, do I have a motion?
So move.
I'll second it. All in favor by raised hand? It is unanimous.
Thank you. The next five will take collectively. They're all professional staff, all effective school year 2025-2026, and that's Heather Carver, Brooklyn Cole, Ashley Harris Gates, Joshua Melman, Michael Smithfoot. Mr. Chair, I make that recommendation.
Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you, ma'am. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor by raised hand? It is unanimous.
Thank you. Next two are will be taken collectively. They're both classified, both school year 2025-2026, and that's Randy Foster and Connie Whitaker. Mr. Chair, I make that recommendation.
Thank you, ma'am. I'll make that motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor by raised hand? It is unanimous.
Thank you. The next set of recommendation will be for substitute employees. They're all pending completion of paperwork, background check, and training requirements. I'd like to take the first four collectively. They're all school nutrition substitutes, all for school year 2025-2026, and that's Heather Burke, Dawn Carruthers, Kathy Chastain, and Abby Killian. Mr. Chair, I make that recommendation.
Board, do I have a motion?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor by raised hand? It is unanimous.
Thank you. Next four will be taken collectively. They're all substitute teachers, all for the school year 2025-2026. It's Ashley Depp, Christy Mathis, Melinda Rogers, and Gracie Stewart. Mr. Chair, I make that recommendation.
Board, do I have a motion?
So move.
Thank you, sir. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor by raised hand? It is unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That is the conclusion of the personnel sheet. Next item is yours.
Yes, ma'am. I have a recommendation to adjourn. Do I
So
have a
moved.
motion?
Second.
I have a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and second. All in favor? It is unanimous. We are adjourned.
Woohoo!